Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya Master Anne-Marie Young. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And Anne-Marie, you'll remember we had Ina Segal on the show with us about a month ago, and it was a fabulous conversation. We had a lot of fun. We learned some stuff. And then do you remember toward the end where she starts mentioning about etheric hands?
Yes.
And we said that we need to learn more about that, but we probably need a whole show to do that. Well, the universe granted our wish. That's exactly what we're going to do today. So Ina, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
We're glad to have you. And we're going to have to start off by having you give us kind of an overview of what etheric hands are really all about.
So, where do you start? So we have this. I think we spoke about the chakras and the chakra system, and most people are aware that we have 7 chakras, or people who have had any exploration and alternative help. But they don't necessarily know that there's more to it. And so I realized when I was starting to do healing work that we had these etheric hands, because we have a chakra in our hands. So it's kind of like, I guess, the eyes of the soul, so to speak. And I remember doing little experiments because I love experimenting. So I would normally, if I was tuning into somebody and focusing on someone, I'm very focused through I guess my third eye, where I'm trying to see, kind of intuitively see what's going on. And I got used to doing that because that's kind of how it was easy for me to understand what's going on with a person. And then I thought to myself, well, I wonder what it would be like if I was just using, my hands and seeing what would happen. And so I started doing that as well. And I found it really interesting because when I was doing one-on-one healing sessions, I would have somebody at home, in my office, and I would kind of use my hands just to sense and go through all the chakras and go through all the different areas and be aware of where things were blocked, but not necessarily actually have any insight. And then I would sit down and I would write these insights. And it was a little scary because I would then share it with the person without really doing my usual kind of like tuning in. And I found that the insights were very detailed and quite different in the way that they came out. And often the person would go, oh, wow, nobody's ever talked about this detail. Nobody knows this. And then I realized that often people would say, again, when I was doing these healing sessions, people would say, are you around my head? And I'd be like, no, I'm at your feet. And they'd go, no, I'm really feeling these hands. And I was like, yeah, I'm actually using these, my etheric hands, which is essentially the etheric body is the copy of the physical body. But we have this chakra in the hands and the feet. And the chakra is all about giving and receiving and working with, with healing energy. So being connected to that, I guess, to divine energy, let's say it in that way. And the etheric body, if we start kind of understanding it, I just mentioned, is a copy of the physical, but often, slightly different. So some parts of the etheric body are slightly bigger than the physical, or slightly different. But overall, like I said, pretty much a copy. And what I found was the more I learned about the etheric body, the more I realized that whilst, to work on the etheric body, why not work with etheric hands firstly? And we could, so I started exploring again. We could change things in the organs. We could adjust the organs, especially the spine as well, because lots of people have issues with their spine like I did. And I also found it really, I guess, really interesting that you could combine this work with etheric hands with so many different processes. But one of the things that I found incredibly fascinating was that you could work once you really activated them, and there is a process to do that, which is quite specific, connected to working with particular sequence of colors.
Hmm.
And once you did that, you could also then work with etheric hands to specifically go back to timelines and go forward into timelines. And this was connected to the fact that the etheric body is the body of memory, as well as being the body of vitality, and also connected to ancestry. So the reason we look like our parents or our family members is because of the etheric body and the fact that it's like a seed, and also why we have certain characteristics that our family members have. And so I find it, especially with timelines, because I felt like people often worked with timelines based on their thinking. So they'd go, I'm going to go back to when I was 5 years old, and then I'm going to work on myself as, a 5-year-old, which is okay, I feel, when you're more at the beginning of the journey. But then a lot of people would say, well, I don't remember, right? I mean, it's normal not to remember when you are 3 or 5 or so on. But I found that the more people started working with etheric hands, which means they had to sensitize themselves, right? You do have to be more sensitive. They would go back to potentially a specific month, specific event. And then I think we started talking last time about archetypes. And so rather than working, trying to remember a specific event, they would start looking at what is this archetype, or let's say of myself as a 5-year-old, look like? And is it standing? Is it happy? Is it hiding? Is it like, what is it showing me in terms of how it's, like what it's doing? And from there, then they would start to go, okay, well, what are you feeling? Talk to me, kind of like actually communicate to me. And then from there, they would go, what are the memories that are connected to it? So the memory would come way later, and we wouldn't start with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's fascinating how that works.
Yeah, and then the memory would actually come to you. But the other thing that would happen is that as they were working with these etheric hands, they'd realize that someone asked me, I think yesterday, about creating maps, right? So I'm a big believer that, if you want to go from one destination to another, you need a map. And if you want to understand more of yourself, you also need a map. Like you need to start to see the links. Where do things come from? And so what people would realize is that, and I think we also mentioned this root cause idea, like that we have this root cause for everything, but it's more that we have seeds for everything. So there's a seed that occurs, and then it grows, and when it grows, that could be another very, very important kind of timeline for you, and an experience that leads you into either a different direction, but based on that seed, or it deepens what happened. And so it's like it's a layered approach, and going back to the beginning does not change the layers. What it does is it shows you where it began potentially, but then as people, as I was saying, started working with etheric hands, they started going, well, there's often 3 or 4 or 5, sometimes it could be 6 aspects to a particular experience that is is weaving itself. Another thing that they noticed, and I've noticed when I've worked with people and myself, is that if you have a health condition, the seed in itself can occur way, way earlier than the health condition itself, which again I found really, really fascinating.
It makes sense. Yeah. When you're talking about this etheric hands concept and the idea of having your hands, the etheric hands being in a different place from your physical hands, it sounds weird when you first describe that. But I just completed a Reiki 2 course yesterday where we had exactly that same kind of thing happen. We had somebody who was on the table, and they swore that the person was working at their feet, and they actually were working up at the head. And like, no, I can feel you at my feet. Well, no, I'm really at your head. And it's a surprise when it happens. Like, wow, I mean, is that really possible? But when you experience it, you realize, wow, it really is possible. And it kind of opens up possibilities that you hadn't thought of before.
Well, it does, because one of the people that I had originally explored his work, he was talking quite a lot about etheric hands. His name was Duskalos, and he was this incredible healer who I think died maybe in the 90s or 2000s or somewhere around there. And he lived in, pretty sure it was Cyprus. And the things that he could do with his etheric hands, because obviously, I mean, he was this incredible being, was so profound. So he could, I mean, he'd have people literally in wheelchairs standing out, like standing and walking out. But one of the things that he was also saying is, which I really embraced in my own teachings and healing journey, is how important it is for people to do the inner work in combination with somebody doing etheric hands, because we can kind of go, oh, it's magical, I don't have to do anything, I'll just go to a practitioner who potentially knows how to do that, and I don't have to participate. And you actually do for it to hold, right? So you could, like, I've seen people release toxins, like even spider bites, where one of my students, she worked with somebody who was bitten by, I think, a white-tailed spider and had not been able to literally move for, I think it was like 2 years.
Wow.
She couldn't walk. And so this student that I taught, she worked on her leg, where she had bitten, or where she had been bitten. And she said that she just, she used her etheric hands and she took out all this toxic kind of, toxins out of this little woman's leg. And she could feel and sense everything. But then she said to her, well, whilst it's been cleared up, you still need to do some work around it, because people kind of think, well, I was bitten by someone, what does it have to do with me? But it's like, why okay, why did it affect you in that way? Like, let's go deeper and explore. And as people start exploring things that they think are accidents, they actually find that there's very few accidents, that things were happening and occurring prior to this so-called accident that need to be explored, or that particular area that where you've been bitten, there's something going on there as well. And so to hold for that healing, you really still need to be looking at what is this area about? What's the wisdom here, and what's being held, even though the etheric hands can help a lot.
It's a great point. Yeah, because if you actually don't take steps to change the scenario, change the energy around the scenario, you could repeat it. You could just bring it right back again. You have to do what it's going to take to change how it happened in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about how you do that.
Well, so many different ways, but
of course.
Again, I want to say, like, for me, the reason that it's so important to understand that you have subtle bodies is because you need to actually realize when you're doing that type of work of where you are working. And so we have the astral body, which is all about our desires and I like, I don't like, our likes, our dislikes, our who we are. That is very different to each person. Even we have a twin sister or brother. So it's like, who am I as a soul? So this astral body kind of contains your soul, or the soul's bigger than the astral, but it's a huge part of it. And it also contains aspects of our destiny and karma and potentially previous lifetimes that we bring. And then we have the etheric body that I spoke about, which is all about our ancestry and memory, and also aliveness, how much vitality and energy we have. And the astral body holds all our emotions, but it also holds all of our sensations. So when people talk about pain or pleasure, they kind of go, well, in my body, but that's not actually true, because the physical body in itself, it's kind of like, it's the casing, but it's not, it doesn't hold pain. And the reason we know that is because when you go to sleep and you're in the deep dreamless sleep, you don't feel pain. You're actually not even conscious in that sense. And that is because the astral body actually leaves. It's not there. It goes into the spiritual world when we're in that deep sleep to recover and regenerate and to come back. And we can feel it often, like when it comes back, we just go, oh my God, I just, not always, but that feeling of, I've just come back, in and so people, again, when we don't recognize all this, it's really hard to know how healing works and how it lasts, and which parts last and which parts don't. So the astral body in itself, also we know that when pain moves, and it pretty much always moves when we focus on it and we're asking questions and we're exploring something, that it is connected to the astral body and it's emotional. And the astral body can change instantaneously. So we can just say a different word. We can, I love color work. And so we can bring a color through our body and feel completely different within moments. But the etheric body, so let me say it like this. So the astral body is like, if we looked at the clock, it's the big hand of the clock, and it's all about minutes, whereas the etheric body is like the small hand, and it's like the hours, but essentially it represents everything that is so much slower. So it is much, much slower to change the etheric body, because the memories, again, people talk about cellular memory, and I've done it so many times too. But when you would break it down, it's like, well, actually, it's the etheric bodies that's holding the memory, that's sending the memory into the cell, so that the cell can then act in a particular way and hold it, which is why we come back to that understanding of diseases, that, well, if your liver changes and your eyes are meant to change in 48 hours, but why do people still have eye issues and liver, I can't remember how long it is now, but not a long period of time, but people still have liver issues and so on. Most of the body changes within 7 years. And so the question becomes, well, how this thing's being held? And they're actually being held through the etheric body. And the etheric that's why it's so much slower for it to change. So I kind of had to explain this to then go back to what do we do? And we usually start with changing things through the astral body. So when we go, okay, we're going to do a process, and the process is immediate, and we get some insights and understandings, that is the change in the astral body. If we combine things like working with the etheric hands, but also doing a process that could be connected to pain, so and that could be something like place your hands on a part of your body where you have pain, breathe into it. Start by asking questions such as, if this pain, let's say, had a shape, what shape would it be? If this pain had a color, what color would it be? Is this a healthy color or an unhealthy color? If this pain had a belief, what belief would it be? What would be underneath this? And you might explore that a few times. What would be the emotion? What would be a potential experience? And so you start with that exploration, then you might go, which is something that I talk about a lot. Okay, this pain that you have or ailment, did it start where you're holding your hands? Did it start where it's showing up now? Or did it start somewhere else? And if it started somewhere else, move your hands there. And so when we move our hands there, we're starting to have this slight connection to the etheric now, because we're going, actually, it didn't start here. It started in another part of my body. Wow, okay. And what was going on then? So this is before people become proficient with their etheric hands and they can actually go, okay, show me all the timelines. But it's still very effective. And so they start to create that connection of, oh, there's more to this than just where the pain is showing up now. Like I was doing a session where I was answering a lot of people's questions recently, and there was a lady, and she said, I've got a, can we focus on my wrist? I've got a pain in my wrist. And when I was tuning into her for a moment, I was like, it's not, it doesn't feel connected to the wrist. It feels like it started somewhere else. And the issue is actually not in the wrist, it's in the neck. And so I said to her, I'm feeling the neck and the shoulders, but not the wrist. And if you keep working on the wrist, you're just going to go round and round in circles, because that's not where it's coming from. You have to start with the neck and the shoulders. And she went, oh my God, I've been seeing, I think it was a physio or a chiropractor, and they were saying the same to me. And it's almost like we need to hear it more than once. And she was like, okay, now I can kind of focus on this. And so what I'm saying is, like, we often, most of the time, we will start with the astral body, with that, oh, it's here and I feel emotions and so on, and it's moving, before we start to get to the etheric. And the reason is because, to really, unless you're working with the etheric hands and you're getting into the etheric, and even with that, you usually need to repeat. And you need to repeat the process regularly for a period of time, where you're getting insights, and you're realizing that from one insight you get to the next and to the next and to the next, right? Because you need wisdom.
Yeah. And it kind of fits into what you said last time, where you said, like, the pains, aches and pains in your body, ask them what that's about. And it's kind of like that then, but then that's the whole next level, is going that a lot deeper. Makes me wonder if we'd ever heal.
Well,
bodies.
Well, I think it's actually a good comment. It's a great comment. It's that thing that it is a journey, and we are layered, and we have so many aspects that show up as we get older, that are different to when we were younger. So we might, let's say you had a really traumatic relationship and you broke up with this person, and at the beginning your nervous system is is so overwhelmed that you can only do so much. You're in the process of calming it down, and you need space to really look over and reflect on that relationship. And so some people, what they do is they just suppress it, and then they end up with with a disease or with pain. And that's why we also have that saying, pain in the neck, so that's one of the areas where it starts. But also, at the beginning, let's say it is a relationship that was narcissistic, which comes with major trauma with it. And so then you have so many layers of that, not just in terms of just the lying that happened and how you bought into it. Let's say you were with this person for, I don't know, 5, 6, 10 years. So as you heal and you go along, you might start working on themes. And I really encourage people to find a theme and be specific with it, as opposed to generalize everything. So you might start working on a theme, and you might start going, and it could be something like, all right, I want to become successful and I want to start a business. And then you realize you're being blocked, and you're self-sabotaging, and for whatever reason, things are just not going the way that you can go. And you start exploring, and you start realizing, hold on a sec, for 2 particular years, or maybe 5 or whatever, of our relationship, during various times, this person would put me down around work, or they would say that, if you want to have a business, you're never going to succeed, or you're not smart enough, or you're not this enough. And that all of these things that this person said is actually being held in different parts of your body. And now that you have had some space from it, you realize, oh my God, I have to work on this. I have to turn all this around. This is where you find these archetypes of yourself from that time, and you start to work with them and communicate with them and bring that, help them to grow out of that stuckness. And another time you realize that you have teenage children, for instance, and when they're teenagers, they drive you, to insanity sometimes.
No, mine's an angel, an absolute angel.
Right? And you realize again, maybe it wasn't even a narcissist you were with, but so many people, got married or got together when they were younger and they had particular ways of thinking, and then they broke up as they were parenting, and now you're navigating, and again all these patterns connected to how you were when you were in a relationship with this person. Now they're in a relationship maybe with somebody else and you are, or you're not, whatever is going on. But you realize as a parent, I have all these issues that are coming up because I'm also potentially seeing them in my children.
Mm.
And so I feel like we're constantly going through themes, and we're also going through these 7-year cycles, which are really fascinating as well. I don't know if you want me to talk about those.
So is the etheric body got the 7-year cycles? Is it that? Well, I would imagine that's just there.
Well, it's kind of both. The astral and the etheric have these, because when we start looking at the chakras, we start to realize, and really, really diving deep into them, we start realizing that each chakra, so even the 7 chakras, even if we just look at the 7, each chakra's development occurred in these 7-year cycles. And so it actually gives us a bit of a story of where we need to look at and explore things. So the root chakra, for instance, was developed from 0 to 7. And it is connected to your physical body. So the state of your physical body at any time in your life is particularly connected to this 0 to 7 time period. But it's also connected to your, to the reproductive system and what the root chakra is about. And I find it so fascinating that sometimes people will say to me, I'll say, like, it is connected to sexuality. I mean, how can it not be? And people are like, no, I've studied it and it's not. And it's like, well, hold on a sec, don't you use those parts? What? I mean, come on. Because somebody said, like, they've read it somewhere and people said, no, it's all connected to trauma and to your family. And it's like, well, can't it be both? Right? I mean, like, and they go, well, the sacral is connected to sexuality. And you're like, well, okay, but I don't necessarily use this. Like, it's more to do with creativity and my feelings. But physically, I am using the root, like, that's why it's called the root chakra in some ways as well. I mean, sorry, but so, it is about the physical, but it's also about that reproduction. And and then and different chakras also share, like the sacral is also connected to reproductive system, but different parts of it, or like more at the top of it. So when we start looking, we start to go, okay, so we have the root chakra, and it's also connected to in a child and development from 0 to 7 years of age. But interestingly, later, when we're about 18 and we start going, what work am I going to do? And how am I going to create things? And what is my destiny? And what am I meant to be doing? We actually have another archetype coming in. And on the shadow, it's called the prostitute archetype. And I love it when people say, I don't have this. And it's like,
don't want to own up to that one.
Okay. And on the light side of it, which means you don't have the light side either, on the light side of it is like, the divine lover of life is how I call it. You know, it's like being fully in integrity with your life, and you know, not being able to be manipulated, like really following your life's purpose and your life's journey, no matter what. So it's like, okay, so you don't have the other one. And so we start looking at it and we start to go, okay, really interesting how this shows up. And then we have the sacral, which is the child between the age of 7 to 14, or how we started to develop. And it's really interesting in looking at 7 to 14. So around the age of 9, this is where we start to look at our ancestry. And so just to go back, 0 to 7, we're actually in the etheric of whoever's looking after us. So it could be the mother, it could be the father, whoever's looking after us the most. So we are a sponge, and we take on their ways of processing information. And that's why some, you know, certain chiropractic, like I used to go to this network chiropractor, and I think they've changed the name now, but they'd work on the nervous system, and they'd go, oh my, like, you're copying your mother's nervous system, or you're copying your father's nervous system, and then you create the same things because you don't even know, you have no idea that you're doing it. And so it's really interesting. I remember I was 30, just to share a little story, and my dad and I were at some party, and we went for a walk, and I was doing certain things in my relationships that were really kind of challenging me at the time. And I remember thinking to myself, where does this come from? Where is this pattern from? Because I had not seen anybody in my family do it. And then I spoke to my dad, who's very good at hiding things. And he said, and I didn't tell him anything about what was going on for me. And it's one of those, you know, rare times where he was really sharing with me about something he was going through. And I remember going, oh my God, I cannot believe this. I tried, and I love him, but there was things he was doing when I was younger that I was like, I don't want to be like you. And I remember thinking, I am exactly like you, and I've tried so hard not to be like you. I cannot believe it. I didn't see that I didn't even see you do this, and I'm doing it so unconsciously.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where, you know, it's the etheric meets the astral. It's like somehow that part of you that's the soul is attracted to this behavior in some ways. And when we're about 9, so this is the sacral, we start to go, I'm going to do this like you, not consciously, but, you know, internally we're like, oh, I'm going to reject this. I'm not going to, like, for example, my dad smoked when I was growing up, and I went, never, I'm never smoking. You know, I'm not going to, and he drank alcohol. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to smoke. Whereas my brother went, yeah, I'm going to smoke and I'm going to drink. Right. And so I think, you know, everyone kind of based on their soul goes, I'm going to, you know, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do something else. So and this occurs around this age of 9, where we either reject things in our ancestry or we really embrace them, even if they show up later. Which is really, really interesting. So you kind of start looking at these stages of development and these 7-year cycles, and you go, like, for instance, you don't realize, we have no memory of the fact that if, let's say, your mother was fighting with your father when you were 3, that you might have been there with your mum and you wanted to save her.
Yeah.
and then you want to save everybody, and you just go, it's like you pick partners that you want to save. You're just constantly going, who can I help? Who can I save? And I was talking to somebody recently, like a few days ago, and she said, well, because this person's having a lot of challenges with her family, she said, it's like when I help people and people are, loving to me, I don't have to really deal with what's going on with my family. And I feel like I'm getting things back that my family is not giving to me. And I was like, well, that's nice, but but one of the things that I realize, especially with women, is that, but this is for both, is that we have the feminine, the masculine within us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of women in particular don't actually really know what it means to really embrace their feminine. In fact, they actually feel very guilty about it, and they become this doing machine when they're younger, and they're like, okay, I gotta look after the kids, I've got to cook dinner, I've got to work, and they never sit still, and they never actually go, what do I need on a daily basis to nurture myself? Where is my time? Because I feel too guilty about it. Yeah. And what occurs is that when you tune into them, like, or when I see it in them, the feminine archetype actually becomes so frozen and it starts deteriorating. And so they will still have emotions, but it's like they're so disconnected, and they're so masculine and in some ways harsh. And then their family goes, oh my God, you're too hard, you're too harsh, you're not soft, you're not, because softness is something that happens through nurturing that part of yourself. And so they actually start to feel isolated and alone, because the longer you dissociate from that part, the harsher it is. And so again, so when you say, Anna Marie, there's things to work on, we start realizing as we learn this, potentially, or if we have an opportunity to learn this, we start to go, right, where is the part of my feminine that I didn't work on, or my masculine that I didn't work on before? And this 7-year cycle starts showing up in relation to something that wasn't transformed or healed or looked at earlier.
Wow.
Fascinating. It's a fascinating topic in so many different ways. But let's get back to the actual etheric hands concept for a moment, because that's kind of what's kicked the whole thing off here. Just a couple of random thoughts. First, when you've worked with people, have you ever been able to work with people using etheric hands at a great distance?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And is it different? Is there like a subjective difference? Does it feel different from, say, if you're working with them in the same room doing the same kind of thing?
Look, I think it can. So if somebody's less sensitive, then they may feel it more if you're in the room with them.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're quite sensitive naturally, they will feel it exactly the same, whether you're thousands of miles away or you're in the same space. Like, for instance, I had an experience several years ago where I was on a boat with my partner, and it was really, really rocky and shaky, and I kept putting my legs up, on the boat, and he was saying, "Don't do that, you're going to hurt yourself." But it was, I don't know, it was just more comfortable to do that. And when we got back to our hotel room, I was like, oh my God, I'm actually having difficulty walking, because obviously I hurt, my tendons, and I could not step on within an hour. I could not, like, he had to carry me to the bathroom.
Wow.
I could not step on my legs. And I was thinking, oh my God. And he was saying to me, because I had to we had to go home in a few days and I had to teach. And he was like, this is probably going to take 6 weeks. This is, I can't believe you didn't listen to me, blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking, okay, I'm going to work with my etheric hands on this. But because I wasn't feeling the best, I actually called one of my students who's an amazing healer. And I said to her, can you just help me for a few minutes? Because, even though she was miles and miles away in a different city, because I'm feeling a little bit sick and I'm not the biggest fan of, I literally felt like throwing up half the time of doing it when I'm in that state. So can you just help me? And she went, yeah. And so she did it. And the next day I was able to walk. I was walking around town. I was walking up and down the stairs. And it was like, oh my God, thank you for the etheric hands. Another time I was in Mexico and my son was playing with my daughter. And he literally, he threw her like with head on the floor, and she hurt her face, but in particular her nose, and it became really puffy, and she was screaming, and there was bruising everywhere. And when I tuned into it, we got into the car straight away, and we were like, okay, we're going to the doctor's office. And I could see that it looked broken to me. And I went, oh my God, let me use my etheric hands and see what happens, and see if I can put it back together, like her nose, literally, and put everything, back together so that it can heal etherically and also take the pain out. Because she was loud. And, so I was doing that for about 20 minutes, and then she calmed down, and we went into the doctor's office, and he looked at her and he's like, well, her nose is broken. And I went, can we do a scan, please, before we, say that, before we, state that that's a fact. And he was like, oh, well, it is. And I went, hey, can we do a scan? And so he did a scan, and it wasn't broken. And he was just went, how is this possible? It was really bruised. How is this even possible with what I'm seeing and what you've described? And I was like, I don't know. And again, within a couple of days, she was totally fine. The whole bruising was gone.
Wow.
It was incredible. And then, I had some of my students working again with their etheric hands with this man who actually had an eye transplant. And the first time he had it didn't work. It was rejected. And so he got it the second time, and it was starting to go into this again, into being rejected, and he would lose his eye. Like, it was pretty bad. And so there was a group of my students, and they were working on him from a distance. And I think, after they worked on him, he kind of went, oh my God, it feels better. I can see through it. And he went and had, again, scans and tests done, and the eye, like it helped. It started working. Whereas just before he was calling his brother, he had done a lot of my workshops and going, I'm going to lose my eye. Like I cannot do this again. And it was incredible how they turned it around by, working from a distance in this particular way. But I've got so many stories around, this, in this experience. I've worked on a young boy who had a hole in his heart using my etheric hands. And he was like, when his mum called me originally, so he was constantly getting pneumonia because that's one of the effects. So he was born with a hole in his heart, and he could be around like literally anybody and they would cough and he would be in the hospital with pneumonia. And when she called me, it was a very interesting scenario because I met her at this baby show that I went to because I just had a baby. And, and so did she. And so we started chatting and she said, what do you do? And I said, healing work. And she just went, oh, yeah, I'm not interested in that. And I said, well, here's my card. Just contact me if you want to catch up with, with our kids. And then she called me and she said, oh my God, I hate when people do that, but, it's happened many times. She's like, you're like my last hope. I don't really believe in this, but my son's in a coma and he's 6 years old and, he's dying and we're saying goodbye. And I was like, oh my God, don't say goodbye. Just give me a moment. And so this is where, again, with the etheric hands, I went, I tuned in and I literally saw him drowning. It was like, and I remember using my etheric hands and just whacking on his chest and getting all of that fluid out. And I also wrote up a process and I said, look, you and your husband need to, while you're with him, need to do it. Let's just use everything we've got, do it 3 times today. And by the evening, so she called me early in the morning. By the evening, he came out of his coma and he was eating. And she said to me, that's never, ever happened before. Like, even if he would come out, he wouldn't eat. And she said, like he was a lot, like really lively and happy. And then he and I worked a lot of the time because he was 6. He was over the, like, I worked with my etheric hands on a distance, but at different times he'd also come to my office. And I think within 6 months, he was saying to me, I can do healing on you now. I know what you're doing. And he became so healthy that he would be at school and everybody would be sick and he'd be the only one who wasn't sick. It was just incredible. And then she did scans, like they had tests on it, and that hole in the heart disappeared.
Wow.
Because again, we were working with the etheric body and trying and repairing it. And because he was so young, I was like, well, I didn't know what's possible. Let's try it. Let's see, what can happen.
Is this kind of thing something that anybody can actually learn?
Yeah. Well, like if they really want to,
Yeah,
and they're willing.
Of course.
To.
I mean, A becomes before B. There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
They need to practice. Like it's
probably a little instruction wouldn't hurt a little bit.
but absolutely, I had a student and she's incredible now. She was 27 when she came to see me to the workshop, and she was, she had depression, anxiety, and constant pain, so kind of like a fibromyalgia. And she, for 2 years, because she was so numb, when you have trauma in your earlier years, you're just numb, that's how you survive. And so she was so numb, and slowly, because I don't believe in forcing and pushing. And so slowly we just work through one layer after another. And literally for the first 2 years, she would just say, I don't really feel much, but I trust and believe what you're doing and what you've taught, because I explain all the details and all the parts of it, how it all connects. And she's like, it makes so much logical sense to me, so I'm just going to keep doing it. And after 2 years, her pain completely released, her anxiety, her depression left, and she started, like, she couldn't see or feel things prior to that. She started seeing things. And again, as she kept working, her etheric hands just became so sensitized and awakened that the kind of healing work that she's done has just been absolutely amazing. And so some people, it'll be very, very quick for them. And for other people, it will take time, because they have to sensitize. They have to move through their own suppression or numbness, and when I say sensitize, it's like you become more awakened, and your nervous system is more connected and works, as opposed to being numb. So the challenge of it is you start to feel everything, but it's not that you become oversensitive, which is different, but it's like you're sensitive to, to what's going on. And so you also need to be aware and make sure you look after yourself and protect yourself in a different way. But yeah, the answer to the question is that everyone can do it. Just some people have to be more patient, and it'll take more time.
Which makes sense. Yeah, it makes total sense. I'm also curious to know, and we're running out of time here, so it's probably we don't have a lot of questions left because we don't have enough time. That's happened so often around here. But for instance, I mentioned I went through. I just finished Reiki 2, so I've been through the 2 levels of Reiki. One of the things that they do when you go through a Reiki course is they do a process called attunement, and that attunement process is where they basically help you to enhance your ability to feel the energy, to be able to work with the energy, and so forth. So I'm curious, with what you're doing when you're instructing somebody about the use of etheric hands and how to make them something that you can actually do something with, is there an attunement process that they go through?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then lots of practice.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're really, because now I'm teaching so much of it, well, I'm teaching it online. It's a little bit different to when I was teaching it live, in terms of this tuning, as you're, talking about. So now it's, like we've got a real, very specific sequence of how to awaken the etheric hands, so that they become sensitized, and so that people can work with them in all sorts of different ways, because you can use them to release pain, you can use them to clear out toxins from the body, you can use them to adjust your spine, you can use them with all sorts of health conditions, you can use them with with different organs and repair of organs inside the body and regeneration of them. So, the idea is that we kind of combine, firstly, different processes, but also, with the etheric hands, but also we're constantly fine-tuning them with a specific sequence of processes, that awaken them, and in particular, awakening energy. They're working with, color, and how the color moves, and where it moves through the hands, and also through the arms, and how we kind of move it all around, so to speak. And then we also, just before we start doing healing work, we'll activate them through connecting to the divine more as well. So we combine.
Yeah, it sounds. I mean, there's always going to be differences, but it sounds like quite a lot of similarity to with what the Reiki practice is all about. So yeah, very fascinating. As usual, we have used up our hour, and I kind of wish we had more. But this has been wonderful. For someone who wants to perhaps explore the idea of learning how to develop their skill with their etheric hands, how do they do that? How do they find out about what you're teaching?
So the best way is to go and watch my masterclass. So it's innersegal.com/masterclass. And I teach a course called Awaken the Healer Within, because I want people to awaken it within themselves so that they can work on themselves and their family and maybe other people, friends or clients eventually. And in that course I teach how to do that. And that particular masterclass gives you kind of an exploration and a journey through what goes on both in the course and doing some healing exercises as well. So there's 2 healing processes that you can start exploring and feeling into. But this is probably where, in terms of talking about etheric hands in this much detail, and this is where I've talked about it more than anywhere else. So thank you for giving me that opportunity. Besides actually teaching about it.
Well, thank you for sharing it. We're honored that you chose this particular venue to do it. So that's really wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm pleased to just put your masterclass up, so I'm going to go and sign up for it.
Well, there you go. Well, I also wanted to ask you, Anne-Marie, because we usually have you do a summary at the end. But do you have any last questions for Ina before she's gone, or do you want to give us a little bit of a summary of what you think is the highlight?
Oh, I have been making so much notes because I think I've done so much work on my mind, and suddenly like healing my body is something that just seems to be cropping up in the last few weeks. And I just found that so interesting, and the fact that it isn't just a case of getting a good mindset practice. There is other stuff that you do need to do. You need to look after your body, and you need to realize the energetic and how, like you say, past trauma, other family trauma coming through, and how it's all passed. So it's so important to be kind to yourself and to look after your own energy and look into what works for you into clearing that, because I've been probably doing it a few weeks and I can really feel the difference. So I just thought that was wonderful.
Beautiful. I love that. And like the last time that you were on, I want to thank you once again on behalf of those people that you are helping that you don't even know about. I mean, because literally hundreds, thousands of people go to your masterclass. I know that for a fact. So, and some small percentage of them you probably end up working with directly, but the large majority of them, you never find out what they're doing. But you're helping all these different people in ways that you never find out about, and yet you keep doing it. And it's such a gift that you're giving to the entire world. So once again, I want to thank you for that, because that really makes a big difference in this world.
Thank you so much, Walt and Anne-Marie.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing all this great stuff today. We appreciate that much. And we appreciate our LOA Today listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.